The Trustbusters were the very definition of a jobber faction and were completely random generated, almost like they were made in universe mode. They made their AEW debut in a tag match on the August 2nd episode of AEW Dark, as the team was consisting of Slim J and Ari Daivari at first, and the two men also accompanied Parker Boudreaux to his match that same night on AEW Dark, so it looked as though he was also a part of this stable. And the next week on Dark, sure enough, the Trustbusters would make their AEW Trios debut, with Parker Boudreaux now officially in the group, and they would then make their AEW Rampage debut on the August 12th, 2022 episode of the show, with Ari Daivari taking on Orange Cassidy, and Parker Boudreaux was facing Sonny Kiss. Yes, this is the quality of show that AEW was putting on Rampage in 2022. After Daivari lost to Orange Cassidy, the Trustbusters would attack the Best Friends and Cassidy. Sonny Kiss would then run out and look as though he was going to make the save, but instead would join the Trustbusters and attack Cassidy, and now the stable had been fully complete. They would then face the Best Friends the next week on AEW Rampage in the AEW World Trios title tournament, the one to crown the inaugural champions. Yes, the Trustbusters were in that tournament, and they of course took the loss to the Best Friends. Following this, they would become regulars of AEW Dark, as like I said, they were literally just a jobber faction. Parker Boudreaux would leave the group as he would join the Mogul affiliates, which also didn't last long whatsoever. That's an entire other story. Sonny Kiss would also leave AEW, and the Trustbusters, made up of Ari Daivari and Slim J, would then sink down to Ring of Honor, with Slim J then eventually being released, and the Trustbusters were pretty much done right then and there, and the most random stable of all time had officially finished. Next up is the Nightmare Collective, which goes down as one of AEW's failed early experiments and one of the worst stables in AEW history that was just never gonna work and never caught on. The early days of the AEW Women's Division was a weird time, and perhaps the biggest encapsulation of that was the Nightmare Collective, which can maybe go down as AEW's first ever booking failure. The Nightmare Collective was a group that simply started out with Awesome Kong and Brandy Rhodes being all spooky and attacking other AEW women and cutting their hair off for some reason. And then on the December 4th, 2019 Dynamite, Melanie Cruz would be picked out of the crowd, and she would have her head shaved and would join the Nightmare Collective. Who remembers Mel in AEW, by the way? I bet at least 50% of you watching this video have absolutely no memory of Mel in AEW. They were joined by Luther, and they were the ultimate disruptors of the AEW Women's Division, and after causing trouble and interfering and cutting people's hair for months, they had their first match as a team on the January 15th, 2020 Dynamite, where Brandy Rhodes and Mel were defeated by Riho and Chris Statlander in an absolutely dreadful match, one of the worst in Women's Division AEW history for sure. It was meant to be Mel and Awesome Kong in this match, but she got injured, so Brandy was subbed in, and yeah, like I said, this match just went off the rails. It was absolutely dreadful, safe to say. So now Awesome Kong is injured, who is the best member and maybe the only good part about this stable. And by this point in the Nightmare Collective's run, they were completely rejected by the fans, garnering go away heat, and their existence was actively hurting the AEW Women's Division, taking time away from people and stories that deserved to be there in their place. And only a week or two after this, AEW listened to the fans and dropped the storyline altogether, and the Nightmare Collective was done and dusted in AEW, as it was explained through video packages of Brandy Rhodes in therapy, with the explanation being that she was basically just crazy and was trying to help Awesome Kong. And that was that. The Nightmare Collective went down as a complete failure and is often labelled as AEW's first booking failure in the company's history, and it's never been mentioned or addressed since ever again. As for the members of the Nightmare Collective though, Brandy Rhodes left AEW shockingly alongside Cody Rhodes in 2022, Mel became a jobber who barely appeared for AEW before she was released in 2021, Awesome Kong was never seen in AEW ever again after her injury, as she was off to film Glow after this, and then she was let go by AEW and retired from wrestling in 2021. Luther though is still around and was quite heavily featured in AEW the last year. Ironically enough, he's probably had the best outcome from the Nightmare Collective. So all in all, a total failure and rightfully cancelled and scrapped. Next up is the Undisputed Kingdom, which were a stable that were doomed to fail from the very start and were part of one of the most underwhelming reveals of all time. The Undisputed Kingdom, of course, was made up of Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, the Kingdom of Mike Bennett and Matt Taven, and Wardlow as they formed at AEW World's End 2023 following the MJF and Samoa Joe World Title match, as there had been teasers for many months about the identity of the mysterious devil who was attacking everyone around MJF, and sure enough, it was revealed to be all 5 members of the newly formed Undisputed Kingdom, who all had their own reasons to get back at MJF. So this storyline, this faction, was started in order to accommodate the MJF and Adam Cole feud. However, there's just one big problem about that, and that is that the Undisputed Kingdom formed whilst Adam Cole and MJF were both injured, so both men were out of the ring for months afterwards when they formed, and they had to put that match on hold, meaning the group just existed and coasted around, doing nothing for months. MJF came back first, but obviously Adam Cole was still on the shelf, and eventually when Adam Cole did return, they would do a quick heel-face switch turn and have Adam Cole back as the face and MJF as the heel, just completely retconning the devil storyline and all the torment that Adam Cole had given to MJF for months as the devil. And when MJF and Adam Cole would finally have their blow-off match, which seemed like it was taking years to finally happen, there was no purpose for the rest of the Undisputed Kingdom, as by that point, Wardlow had already been off TV for months. The Kingdom would promptly disappear from AEW TV right at the end of the storyline, and Roderick Strong and Adam Cole would reform the Undisputed Era with Kyle O'Reilly now as the Paragon. And all in all, the Undisputed Kingdom was just a total failure and a stable that went cold so quickly. Next up are the Outcasts, who despite all their success as a trio in the company could just never catch on with the fans, and it seemed as though they were very much thrown together stable and AEW had no idea what to do with them. Ruby Soho debuted as the Joker at AEW All Out 2021 in the Casino Battle Royal. Toni Storm debuted on the March 30th, 2022 edition of Dynamite in the Owen Hart tournament, and Saraya debuted on AEW Grand Slam 2022 in September, and shortly after announced that she was out of retirement and would be wrestling again soon. However, it wouldn't be until the build-up to Revolution 2023 though that these three would finally cross paths, and it all started when Toni Storm lost her AEW Women's Championship to Jamie Hayter at Full Gear 2021, and while she was feuding with Jamie Hayter, Saraya was feuding with Britt Baker, who is of course aligned with Jamie Hayter. This led to Toni Storm and Saraya crossing paths and forming a team, and on the January 18th, 2023 edition of Dynamite, Toni Storm and Saraya would turn heel shockingly when they attacked Willow Nightingale and denounced the AEW homegrown talent in the women's division. This led to a triple threat match at Revolution 2023 as Jamie Hayter would defend her title against Saraya and Ruby Soho. Ruby Soho had aligned herself with the homegrown talent, however she had also received interest to join up with Toni Storm and Saraya and create a trio. And after Jamie Hayter would successfully retain her title in the triple threat match at Revolution, that's exactly what would happen when Ruby Soho turned heel at the end of the match, attacking Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker and aligning herself with Saraya and Toni Storm. Toni Storm, Saraya and Ruby Soho would officially dub themselves as the Outcasts and put the women's division on notice. They had a disdain for AEW homegrown talent and felt like they were bigger stars than all of the other women. The Outcasts would continue to feud with the homegrown talent of AEW, namely Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter, Sky Blue and Willow Nightingale. And every women's match on TV would kind of be the same thing. It would be an Outcast versus a homegrown talent, and regardless of the result, the Outcasts would attack them at the end of the match, leading to more homegrown women coming out and a big brawl or a chase ensuing. It was pretty much a weekly routine. At Double or Nothing 2023, we'd see a rematch between Toni Storm and Jamie Hayter for the women's title, and this time Toni Storm would best Jamie Hayter and she would win the match, and she would regain the AEW Women's World Championship to become a two-time champion. Toni Storm would defend the title successfully against Sky Blue on Dynamite, Willow Nightingale at Forbidden Door, and Taya Valkyrie on Battle of the Belts, and while she was doing this, Ruby Soho was on her own side quest as she looked to win the Owen Hart Memorial Cup. She defeated homegrown rivals Britt Baker and Sky Blue in the quarter and semi-finals respectively, before meeting another rival in Willow Nightingale in the final, with Willow coming out on top. And Saraya throughout all of this, Well, she had that mixed tag with Chris Jericho against Britt Baker and Adam Cole, I guess. I don't know, Saraya didn't really do anything during this period other than hang out with them and be annoying. Toni Storm would lose the title to Hikaru Shida on the 2nd of August Dynamite, ending her reign at just over 2 months, and a match would be set for All In for the women's title, a 4-way match between Hikaru Shida, Britt Baker, Saraya, and Toni Storm. And as for Ruby Soho, she was facing Chris Statlander at All Out the next week for the TBS title. However, leading up to these matches, the cracks in the Outcast were beginning to show. Specifically Toni Storm, who looked to be on a new path as a solo act as she debuted a new Hollywood noir actress gimmick, and at All In, after Toni Storm accidentally took out Saraya's mother, Saraya attacked Toni Storm, and when Ruby Soho ran out, she was also attacked by her Outcast teammates, and while Saraya would go on to win this match and win the women's title, it looked like the Outcasts were over. The Outcast would stick around for a little bit longer, but it was only Saraya and Ruby Soho, and eventually Harley Cameron was added on as a third, and they were mainly on AEW Rampage, whilst Toni Storm would continue her timeless character and go beyond and beyond. The Outcast eventually broke up on Rampage following a weird storyline with Harley Cameron and Angelo Parker and Ruby Soho, and it was a weird relationship storyline. And nowadays, Toni Storm is the current AEW Women's World Champion and one of the biggest stars in the company's history. Saraya is out the company entirely. Ruby Soho is off TV after having a child and will be back soon at some point, I'm sure. And Harley Cameron, surprisingly enough, has organically caught on as one of the most over acts in all of AEW. And overall, the Outcast can kind of be looked at as a weird time for all 4 of its members. Next up is American Top Team, who combined with the Jericho Vortex created a summer of hell in AEW and one of the worst storylines ever. So Dan Lambert is the head of the American Top Team MMA gym, and he's had some involvement in wrestling before, and he would debut for AEW in July of 2021, and he would first start cutting promos, putting down wrestling and the industry, with many American Top Team fighters such as Jorge Masvidal, Paige Van Zandt, Kayla Harrison, Junior Dos Santos, and more getting involved in AEW TV. They would align themselves with the Men of the Year, Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky, and would begin feuding with Chris Jericho and the Inner Circle. And this was easily one of the worst feuds in AEW history, as we had to put up with Chris Jericho and Dan Lambert town hall segments every single week on both Dynamite and Rampage. It felt like everyone in that feud was just stuck in a vortex, and it was just some of the most mundane television that AEW were doing at the time, during a phase in the company where they had some very good TV. The feud climaxed at Full Gear after nearly a 3-month-long feud, with the Inner Circle defeating the American Top Team lads of Junior Dos Santos, Andre Arlovsky, and Dan Lambert himself, as well as the Men of the Year, in a Minneapolis street fight that went nearly 20 minutes, and I think to this day I've never even watched it. When I watched this pay-per-view live, skip, to the toilet, skip, not watching that shit. Dan Lambert would eventually fade out of AEW, and the only MMA fighter to get signed out of it was Paige Van Zandt, who had 1 match, and I thought she had a decent performance, but it ended up being her last AEW appearance ever, and she never turned up again. And finally are The Firm, who go down as one of the most bizarre and random factions in AEW, as clearly some plans got scrapped along the way, and The Firm would end up suffering as a result and got scrapped very quickly. As during the build to All Out 2022, Stokely Hathaway would begin recruiting wrestlers to The Firm, including Ethan Page, Lee Moriarty, Big Bill, and The Guns, and they would attack the competitors at the All Out 2022 Casino Ladder match in order to help the Devil win the chip. Of course, the Devil ended up being MJF. It was an interesting way to have MJF return to AEW and to get back to the top of AEW, as he was being aided by Stokely Hathaway and The Firm, and it looked as though he was going to be part of The Firm with the stable surrounding him. But very quickly there would start to be tension between MJF and The Firm, and it eventually led to very quickly and early on in The Firm's existence that they turned on MJF and attacked him. And just like that, all of the momentum for The Firm was just finished. They came in so hot, immediately got themselves involved in a world title feud, but MJF turned on them, and after that the plans for the firm just completely faltered as they became a complete jobber faction, and the most notable thing they did was feud with Matt Hardy and the Private Party. Yep, from the world title to the weird Hardy Party storyline, that was what they were getting. They were very much a Rampage act. My own speculation is that MJF maybe rejected plans to work with the firm, and I don't really blame him if that's the case, because he was on his way to winning the world title, and what good did having a load of jobbers around him do? Yeah, just a group that seemed to have no long-term vision or plan B beyond the MJF stuff, and it came back to bite them. As that concludes my list of the worst AEW factions of all time, some honorable mentions go out to the Factory, the Hardy Family Office / the Andrade Hardy Family Office, and maybe the Learning Tree, and the Vendetta faction that never formed with Deonna Purrazzo and Taya Valkyrie that just never went anywhere. Those can also go down as honorable mentions. Comment down below any you can think of, like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe notifications on to never miss a video. I'll see you all in the next one, goodbye and keep on rolling.